Fall cannot dampen our enthusiasm. Today is not just America's birthday, but of course is the birthday of our 30th president and one of our greatest presidents, Calvin Coolidge. Today we commemorate both the birth of America and the birth and the life and the legacy of President Coolidge, the First Lady Grace Coolidge, and their family, and we're honored to have members of the Coolidge family standing up here right beside me to help us celebrate. So please join me in welcoming members of the Coolidge family. On behalf of the Vermont Division for Historic Preservation, I see Bill Jenny here who administers the site. This is his 26th year of service. Thank you to Bill. Laura Trishman, the State Preservation Officer. We are thrilled and honored to have this privilege. I also would like to welcome the members of the Board of Trustees of the Coolidge Foundation, and on behalf of all of them and our staff, welcome all of you here today. We couldn't be happier that you're here to celebrate with us in the hills of Vermont, Vermont's own president. We have a very special ceremony, which has been a tradition here in Plymouth Notch for many years, and we are honored to be joined by the Vermont National Guard, and again this year by Adjutant General Stephen Cray, who will lead our ceremony. So please welcome the Vermont National Guard and Adjutant General Cray. And now the Vermont National Guard will present the colors. Thank you. And now for the second time this morning, we're joined this morning by Jennifer Sales Harville, who's standing immediately to my right, who had a wonderful rendition of the national anthem at our naturalization ceremony. And now Jenny will sing the national anthem again this morning. Please join her in singing, and please welcome the great-granddaughter of President and Mrs. Grace and Calvin Coolidge, Jenny Sales Harville.
Say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets ring clear, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
And now at this time, the National Guard, joined by the Coolidge family, will lay a wreath sent from the White House in Washington on front of President Coolidge's gravestone. And now, please join me in more formally welcoming a great leader for Vermont, a great leader for our country, the leader, the Adjutant General of the state of Vermont, Major General Stephen Cray.
Thank you and good morning. It is an honor for the Vermont National Guard to be able to participate in this yearly event. Very special for the United States, certainly very special for the state of Vermont. On behalf of the soldiers and the airmen of the Vermont National Guard, along with Command Sergeant Major Quick and the Honor Guard from Rutland, we are honored here to pay our respects to one of our great presidents. Calvin Coolidge was one of the most practical men that has served in the highest office of our country. And as we celebrate our nation's 239 years of independence this weekend, we also celebrate the life of the only president born on the 4th of July. And just as President Coolidge was proud to serve his country, so are the men and women of our armed services. Service defined the life of President Coolidge, holding many elected and appointed positions. The service is one of our Vermont National Guard core values. Along with integrity and excellence, service defines a lifestyle and a commitment to something greater than oneself. The men and women of our armed service are as patriotic, selfless, and humble as any generation that has served before them. And the young men and women that join our ranks are as dedicated and professional individuals that usually ask for nothing but to do their jobs. So since 1764, the Vermont National Guard Green Mountain Boys have served the Green Mountain State and our nation with honor and distinction. But I think President Coolidge would be proud of us and thankful for the remembrance of his legacy here today. Thank you.
Well, from all of us, I know I speak for the foundation and for myself, but I think everyone, owe a deep debt of gratitude to everyone in the National Guard and all of our service members serving and defending our country around the world. So please, one more big, big round of applause. Thank you. Now I'm honored to be joined by Laura Treishman. Laura is the State Historic Preservation Officer for the state of Vermont. She is a wonderful, wonderful leader of all the efforts to preserve and to educate people, not only from Vermont, but around the country and around the world, about certainly the Calvin Coolidge State Historic Site, but all of Vermont's state historic sites. Laura and I joined this effort about the same time, and have been welcomed by such a loving community of all of you. So it's especially neat for me to be able to welcome Laura, who will say a few words to us right now. Ladies and gentlemen, Laura Treishman.
On behalf of Governor Shulman, I welcome you to Plymouth Notch and the President Calvin Coolidge State Historic Site. It is the honor of the Vermont Division for Historic Preservation to be the stewards of the Calvin Coolidge family home. It actually was the wish of First Lady Grace Coolidge and her son John that the boyhood home be given to the state of Vermont, ensuring its perpetual preservation. At the time the home was given to the state, President Eisenhower borrowed the words of Calvin Coolidge when he said, "Men build monuments above the graves of their heroes to mark the end of a great life. But women seek out the birthplace and build their shrines not to where a great life had its ending, but where it had its beginning." The presidents both concluded by saying, "Life may depart, but the source of life is constant." We are grateful to the vision of Grace Coolidge and her family. To that equation, we must now add the Calvin Coolidge Presidential Foundation, and most especially all of you, who like Calvin Coolidge, love these hills, cherish this great place, and join us on this 4th of July in remembering the man, the statesman, his fashionable wife, and his inspiring ancestors and descendants for making this place constant. Welcome to Plymouth Notch. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you, Laura. Now we're going to read some selections from a speech that Calvin Coolidge gave. And to tell you more about that speech and to introduce our readers for today, please welcome my good friend and my colleague, our associate at the Coolidge Presidential Foundation, Rashad Thomas. Rashad.
My fans from our debate camp. The excerpts you're about to hear, read by Jenny Sales-Harville, John Sales, and Laura Treishman, are from a speech President Coolidge gave in 1924 at the dedication of the statue of John Erickson. John Erickson, which is very apropos because one of the new citizens who's now born. And so President Coolidge in 1924 dedicated a statue of him in our nation's capital. And the Crown Prince of Sweden was there, and it was a really wonderful ceremony. Most of the speech is about how awesome Sweden is, which is probably not appropriate for this event today, but the first 3 paragraphs are all about the importance of being an American, and for those who come to our country from other places, we're all bound together as Americans. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Jenny.